Hello, Jelger.
Hey, Rich.
You wanted to talk to me about applying microsolidarity in different contexts.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, tell me about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks a lot for taking the time. Really appreciate it. Um, I'm going into this conversation quite open-ended, just out of curiosity to speak about these things because I've now engaged with Microsolidarity like in practice programs and during two gatherings, and have been more and more integrating it in my own life and kind of becoming more accustomed to setting up crews, those kind of things. And I feel like potential in where I work within the university context, also, or at least the curiosity to experiment it also with it in
Hmm.
those contexts. And part of that context is a course I co-lead and co-teach called Collective Futures. And in that context, I have quite a lot of agency basically to design the program and to like experiment with certain formats and working with the groups. And I'm also involved in some other contexts with our initiatives that are more about kind of bringing inner development initiatives within a university context and how to basically make space in university curricula for really seeing inner development as a very important foundation of learning spaces today.
Hmm. Hmm.
um, but in that context, I have less agency of like really facilitating and hosting my own space. So that's two things. And the other thing that I'm working on currently is I'm working on a kind of an initiative that I think of, I wanted to like prototype it initially or do some tests with my own students about kind of an initiative that helps educators and students grapple with the meta crisis in a way that they can kind of that we facilitate a space to learn more cognitively about it and what it is about, but also mostly to hold it a space for emotional processing of it.
Hmm.
Basically, to see it as a space that helps people actually get more in touch with reality, with the truth of the time that we live in, especially through allowing certain emotional processing that often otherwise draws people away into distraction or denial, what kind of form, and to create a space that makes it easier to think about these things, even if they are big and scary.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And that's still sort of in a design phase, but I'm kind of here and there finding uh, things that I want to include in the curriculum. And yeah, but I think of it as kind of maybe sort of a multi-session thing where I provide and facilitate a space for something.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
to grapple with
Awesome.
these things together.
Awesome. I really see the intersections between these different contexts, right? Like um on the inner development stuff, my catchphrase for a while has been that, at least in my view, development happens spontaneously in the right social context.
Hmm.
You know, that like the main obstacle to people developing usually is um a constraint around their what roles they feel they've got social permission to play. And they're
Hmm.
like, oh, I've got this script about how to be a person, and now I'm facing challenges that ask something else of me, and I don't know how to become the kind of person who can do that because I'm in a social context where it's like uh, my role is defined already, and now I'm being asked to like expand and do a different kind of role. And I think we can create social contexts that are much more permissive and that just are
Hmm.
give people that felt sense of acceptance, like, oh, you're actually welcome to be in development. You're welcome to be changing your mind. You're welcome to be incomplete and figuring things out. And we're going to accept you on your good days and your bad days. And I think that creates the fertile ground for like that developmental urge to come up, um, rather than a kind of like an image of inner development, which is kind of like, I don't know, going to the gym and working out really hard or having to do this, like
Hmm.
pull myself up by my bootstraps thing. It's like, no, 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 just engineer the social context so that it's very supportive. And then
Yeah.
people can't help but catalyze growth. And then the same with the meta crisis and like how do you metabolize really intense emotions? It's like you metabolize intense emotions collectively. Like you just
Mm,
enroll more nervous systems, and then that's actually things become tolerable when people, yeah, when they have that felt sense of safety. It's like suddenly that there's all this extra capacity for dealing with stuff that when you feel isolated is overwhelming.
mm.
So yeah, I get that it's interrelated. I wonder how to cut the conversation to make it um digestible because it's like, well, there's a lot of
Yeah,
pieces.
yeah, exactly.
Maybe it would be useful
Well,
if you could say anything about what you already know, or like what's gone, like when it comes to bringing microsolidarity into your work, what has been working well, or what's been clear, or what hypothesis have you tested, or yeah, sort of where
mhm.
you're up to so far.
Yeah, I think the most concrete context to enter it might be through my own course,
Yeah.
um, because it's kind of a program that students follow for 5 months full time. We have between 12 and 20 students usually, and we are like as a one group. We do collective activities, but the students also work in subgroups, like partly in project groups. So you have groups of 3 to 4 students that work on a project, research project for those 5 months. And they also work in committees to co-organize parts of the program. So that's kind of the levels of organization that we have. Um, and what I've mostly been thinking of is kind of the period also after the program, because I think we do a lot of stuff in our program that is quite new for the students. We have quite a lot of time and attention for relational work and building a shared context that really serves the development of different students and really, yeah, invites them to like connect with their intrinsic motivation to do that. But they find it hard to imagine afterwards what to do then, because they like kind of know like, okay, yeah, then I am going to enter like a career market, but it's not easy to find these kind of spaces. And I think that's true. And I think what my vision is that I want to help these students become good at making those spaces. And in that, I see a role in structures and expertise of microsolidarity. Yeah. And so far in my course, I've experimented more during the course with some like activities, um, but I haven't specifically worked with the sort of crew format yet. And I'm curious, like, to what degree are things feasible to do within this context and within the timelines that we have? Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very interesting. Um, that so the hypothesis is like um it seems that people thrive when you give them, yeah, when you put more time into relationship building and you like create this set apart culture, which is a bit different from what they're normally experiencing. And then at the end of 5 months, it's over. And so then it's like, can we equip them to create those kind of containers themselves?
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
I mean, I will say just from my own experience of like, running the gatherings and stuff like that, it's pretty it's a high bar. Like it's a real challenge. It's one thing, like something that has been re surprisingly easy for us to do, I think, is can we reliably create the social conditions for trust and belonging, and like, can we get that going? Is it, yes, we know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But can we reliably teach people, hey, notice that you're feeling different than you normally feel, and then notice what is the social context that's making that happen, and notice like what's within your agency to, how could you repeat this? Like, how could you construct, like, to make the invisible visible, like that, to make the subject an object and go, oh, right, these are just objects. These are just physical, there's choices that Jelger made about how we're spending time in groups and what kind of questions we're answering and how we're listening. And like, that was a set of choices, and I could go and replicate those choices. Like, we've found it really difficult um, to reliably bring people up to that meta level where they actually observe what's making the good feelings happen, because they're so captivated by having the good feelings. And they're like, oh, it's so nice to belong. And you're like, yeah, but are you noticing how we're creating the context for belonging? That
Mm,
it's challenging. So yeah, I would think of you as a research peer in this.
mm, yeah, yeah, yeah. One thing we've I've done with them past semester before the summer is kind of involve the students in kind of a small research project. We got a little internal funding for kind of considering what are the dimensions of change that this
Mm,
program contributes to,
mm,
and then what are like the more outer dimensions of that and the inner dimensions, and to help, yeah, to like do sessions with the students to collaboratively think to like what makes a meaningful learning experience, what are like the longer term effects of these inner dimensions of learning. And I think that was a I think I, of course, uh, I, we also learned a lot from that that I would do differently next time. But it was like nice to involve them in these kind of practices,
mm,
help them to get more active awareness about these things. Yeah.
mm.
Mm. And still, I wonder if there's ways to help them even better feel a sense of agency in making these spaces. Um, which is of course not easy if you're also younger and kind of also maybe sometimes come from an educational system where you're kind of used that you're entering spaces that others kind of hold with
Yeah,
certain rules, to make the
yeah,
transition to like, no, I can make
yeah.
spaces too.
Yeah, I wonder if actually if it's interesting to think about um how do you generally design for enhancing people's agency rather than specifically saying the agency to create social spaces, but just in general, so like um I think that's one of the undercurrents with all of the microsolidarity events is that we just want people to be, invisibly and atmospherically encouraged to become more self-reliant and more like agentic, more like, there's this thing that I've been thinking a lot and talking a lot about in the last few weeks since the summer camp we had. Um, there's a set of skills around noticing, oh, I don't like how things are going. I'm dissatisfied for some reason. I've got a problem with that person, or I'm just like unhappy in general, or I don't really fully feel welcome, or some kind of unsatisfaction, and taking that feeling and turning that into some kind of constructive action, an invitation, or like a request for support, or like a proposal for how we could do things differently, or like a prototype. I'm gonna just go and do a prototype of like this is a different way of doing things that I think is more exciting, like how to guide people down that path of like um that the hosts or the teachers or the whoever's like in that authority position is just doing a set of there's a set of moves and actually they're accessible to everyone and that the space sort of organically encourages you to just take those moves and that um
Mm.
yeah I don't know, do you have during the course, do you have any like do you have like sort of, I'm thinking about engineering like peak experiences, like do you have any gatherings or like times where everyone's come together where you can actually start to um bake in some new behaviors together like that?
Mm. Yeah, like there is, I would say there is, of course, you have a lot of certain phases. In general, across those 5 months, we have quite a lot of time that we are together as a group.
Mm,
Um, and the more special moments are, I would say, the introduction week, the first week where you have like sort of do a lot of the groundwork of establishing a high trust environment and kind of a relational field. There is an introduction. It was sort of a weekend that we go on for 2 days usually, which is kind of a peak experience. And then there is presentations like midway the program and at all the way at the end with also
mm.
an event connected to it. Yeah.
In that first weekend, where are the opportunities for people to exercise their agency?
Well, last year we did kind of an open mic, open stage evening where we
Cool.
invited all the students to do something with or for the rest of the group, whatever they wanted, either
Yeah,
singing a song or doing a dance or playing a game. Yeah.
yeah, cool. That's nice.
Yeah.
I remember we went to a kind of open mic. Can't remember exactly the phrase that they used, but the way we kind of copied it and then reframed it slightly, and we called it a listening party. And the whole framing was like, this is not about you doing an amazing performance. This is about the audience doing an amazing job of like being receptive. And so
Mm,
it's a real emphasis on like when the person takes the stage, everyone's gonna like blast them with like love and encouragement and applause before they've done anything. Just like, oh my God, it's amazing that you're here and you're gonna do something for us. And all the pressure is on the audience. The audience is gonna do a great job of like
yeah.
listening and supporting, which was really
Oh,
fun.
I love that. I love that.
That's really nice.
Mm,
But yeah, I think I'm just like looking for opportunities where you give people that experience of like, oh, the things that I care about, I can take action and sh I can modify the space that I'm in and I can attract people to me that care about the same stuff that I care about and the kind of the program is adapting to me because this is what I care about, like that um
mm, yeah.
that basic sort of open space technology of whoever shows up, whoever brings the idea is the one that gets to shape, decide what we're doing. I
Yeah.
always wonder if there are moments of that that can be sprinkled in early so that it's not this like big leap at the end to say, now go off and start projects on your own where you're, you know,
Hmm.
like, yeah, if it can be seeded earlier on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a nice idea. I think it also, thanks for mentioning the open space technology. I think I can experiment with that more within this context because what we do now, like over the first, like when we start, we kind of have prepared the majority of the schedule for the first, like say 2 months.
Mm,
And then gradually over the time, we start handing over more and more agency to the students. So they get
right.
like a budget to also invite guest speakers and organize some workshops. And they are now organized in committees to kind of do that. And that works quite okay. But I sometimes it feel, for example, if you think about organizing some workshops for the whole group, it can still feel a bit more like that happens in a container of like the few people that are in the training or workshop committee. And I would be curious how to bring that more into this open space and invite the students really to feel more like, oh, we can have this open space and really do things for each other. And
Yeah.
we have one activity, recurring activity that relates to this, is that each week one of the students, also as teachers participate, do a 1 hour or 45-minute session of whatever we are interested in.
Mm,
And that is usually one of the most highly rated elements of the
mm,
program actually,
mm.
because students put a lot into it and they usually do really cool stuff. Yeah.
And I'm guessing that that's the whatever topic comes into that session, it's the person is bringing the thing they're most interested in. Like you're feeling people's genuine like curiosity and passion for it, and that's what makes it engaging.
Yeah.
Which I think
Yeah.
is the best part of open space, is that you just surface like where is the what's alive here, like let's focus on that. I
Mm.
wonder if there's a way, I don't know how you've done this already, but even just like visually or how you use design to say like, okay, this whole course we've got a co-created agenda from start to finish. And we just know that when you're first arriving, you're still getting your bearings. So you might not have a strong idea about what we should be doing. So as people who've done this a bunch of times, we're going to pre-populate a few things. Well, there's already a few post-it notes on the wall that we're doing. But anyone can put a post-it note on and that we'd expect that, yeah, we'll do the first few and then that'll sort of show you how the ball rolls. And then like, does it feel like there's one general open container and that the teachers are populating a couple of things, or does it feel like there's a phase shift from led from the front of the room and then switching to a participatory mode?
Mm. I think here's still a lot to win for us. Yeah. Currently, we kind of getting more clear, making more clear visually, like this is the structure of the program. These are kind of the basic structure that we provide can really help the students to understand where the open space is, basically in
Yeah.
between.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's a bit unclear still for them
Yeah.
because we don't hand them over like a full syllabus or overview of the full program. We kind of along the way guide them and mention things, but also leave a lot of room for improvisation. Um, yeah, but I feel like we can more clearly
Yeah. When you
do that.
say leave room for improvisation, like I think that can feel very ambiguous or disorienting unless it's really clear. It's like, here is the space for improvisation, and then people are like, oh, right, so this is the part where we improvise.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Otherwise, yeah, I can feel if because it's in contrast to, everyday expectations about what university is like.
Yeah,
It can just be like, what is there a plan? Like, what's going on? Who's responsible? Um, I was just thinking about, have you ever done the art of hosting training?
I haven't.
I did one in New Zealand. I don't know if they're all like this, but I just thought the program was really awesome. The way it was designed was like it was a long time ago, so I haven't got it clear in my head. But basically, the art of hosting has a whole bunch of different facilitation techniques. And at the start of the program, they kind of they're like, hey, look, there's 30 different facilitation things we could teach you. Let's run a quick process to see where the interest is, and we'll surface, okay, oh, these 12 things are most interesting. Great. Um, we'll shuffle them around onto an agenda for the next 4 days, and then there'll be someone who has a lot of experience from the hosting team, and then we're going to need volunteers from the group to co-host each of these sessions with us. And by running the session, you're going to learn how the session works.
Hmm.
Um, and so like every part of the program was co-led by someone with a lot of experience and then someone who was brand new. Um, and so it meant that there's a really deep skills transfer happening where that like experienced teacher is helping you prepare for, okay, tomorrow afternoon, we've got to run a workshop for everyone. And what do you need to be thinking about? What are the key principles? Like, here's all the run sheets that we use, and this is what we're thinking about, but you're going to be the one in front of stage doing it. And then at the
Hmm.
end of the program, there's, um, after you've run your thing, there's going to be a debrief and a reflection and a retrospective on like how you could do it better next time and what are your takeaways. So like a really, for me, kind of top-notch learning experience. Um, and I wonder if there's a way that you could enroll some of the students in teaching the students, like and seeing what does it feel like to be at the front of the room and saying, now we're going to do this in small groups and then we're going to do
Hmm.
that. Like it's intimidating until you do it a few times and then you're like, oh, this is kind of easy.
Hmm. Oh, that's really nice. Yeah, to basically invite students to co-design elements together with us.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's really cool. I'm trying to think of in which elements of the program that could work. Um, yeah, it could definitely work. Yeah,
I don't
that's a
know if
nice
you
idea.
saw
Yeah.
a couple of weeks ago, it's published on the Microsolidarity YouTube, but there was a conversation in our monthly network call which was a fishbowl conversation. It was hosted by Ivan and Julia.
Hmm.
And that format emerged from um, Jocelyn. Jocelyn's been the one kind of holding the container of this monthly network, like a monthly network call. Every month we're going to do something, and it's her
Yeah.
responsibility. And she calls for volunteers and sort of gives people shoulder tapping of like, hey, you could do something here. And
Hmm.
she got together with Julia and Ivan and sort of got the conversation going and helped them think through some different approaches and ideas. And
Yeah.
then they came up with that design and they run it and it was awesome. It felt like one of the most engaging sort of intellectual discussions on the topic that we've had in a long time. Um, and I feel like that's such a good model to have like
Yeah.
someone with lots of experience and lots of context to just be there to make sure that it feels easy. But that
Yeah.
actually everyone who's running the show is pushing themselves to the edge of
Hmm.
their learning questions. They're like, "Oh, this is wobbly, and I think it's gonna be. I hope it's gonna be okay." Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's a great idea. Yeah. In a way, we do something similar in the project groups. For example, we have then I last year supervised two project groups, and then we have like a co-creation approach. So the students really have the lead in the project, but we also work together on it. So in that sense, we have this co-learning uh,
Mm.
in the project team. But I think what I'm hearing here is also to use these kind of models, these ideas in more group formats. Like if we would co-organize a session for the whole group or for a wider group, I think that's cool. Yeah.
And maybe at the start, people are quite shy about it and they're not bringing a huge amount of creativity or leadership to the job, but at least they're like in the prep meeting with you, thinking it through and having a few suggestions and like having a little, holding a little part of it or something, or like, oh, I'll run the check-in at the start of the
Mm-hmm.
session, or there's little items of responsibility until they realize like, oh, like most people I find they realize it's pretty
Yeah.
um easy and doable, but there's this kind of threshold of intimidation they need to get over.
Yeah. 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 Super interesting. Yeah. Thanks. And now another question comes up for me, which is kind of a slight uh, step tangent relating also to the other initiatives I'm involved in, but also more generally thinking about this program and the role it has in place within the university. But eventually, like what drives me is to kind of seed a certain culture within an institution like that.
Hmm.
So it comes with the question how to extend it. And like you also mentioned already, that like you have these initiatives about inner development, but often it then it is initially about okay, you can do these kind of practices in the classroom. Well, eventually it's really about creating this context, right, in which meaningful learning can happen. Um, and I've been thinking about how to make a translation, how to basically use the work that we get to do in our program in making certain spaces, and how to translate that to others within the university to really make a case for like, hey, if you facilitate a space like this and you think in creating this context, then a lot of things shift in a
Hmm.
meaningful way.
Hmm.
And you not only meet social and relational needs of people, but also actually the research and project work that they're doing gets to a higher level, which I think from my observations really happens. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I would say that culture is made of practices, I think. So like starting at least with like, these are some practices you can run in the classroom. I think it is a useful place to start,
Mm,
so long as it's given enough, yeah, holistic or sustained focus, that like for example, the way that we've been building a developmental culture at our work at the hum, it's like um it's a priority that seeps into every aspect of what we're doing. So like every 3 months there's a process to check in on, and we do like peer coaching to check in, what's your current learning edge, like what's your goal, where are you extending yourself, um and what kind of support can we offer you that's going to push you out of your comfort zone. We're constantly kind of running um sort of, a very informal kind of apprenticeship program, always pulling someone in to take on a role that is outside of their comfort zone. As soon as someone gets comfortable with a role, we push them out of it, get them to stretch to the next hardest thing, like always hold that sort of developmental pressure on people in a really constructive, really positive, elevated way.
mm,
But it's like we're here to grow. And like in your context, I can imagine something about even how you introduce the course, that it's like, hey, you've come here to learn, and there's going to be a whole bunch of technical, like hard skills that you're going to come away with. And this is an unusual opportunity where you get to develop as a person. Like there's some fundamental pieces of how you think about yourself, how you communicate, how your relationships work, that you have an opportunity here to shift permanently. And like how do you want to make the most of that opportunity, like baking that into the initial
mm,
framing of the invitation that people are coming into. I think it's kind of, I mean, it's really exciting. And yeah, it needs to be this accumulation of small things that adds up, right, to like a bigger, that it's not just like, oh, it's my unusual teacher that has these unconventional ideas. It's like, no, 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 there's actually a program happening here with multiple touch points and lots of different people singing from the same sheet.
yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Do
Exactly.
you do you have allies in the faculty?
Yeah. I run the program together with one colleague. So basically, we co-design and co-teach it.
Yeah.
So that's an important ally. And in the faculties, I have some people that feel like allies who are, for example, also work involved in these inner development related initiatives. Um, yeah, so I'm over time, I feel like I'm building a network of allies, but those are more lighter
Yeah.
interactions. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the cool thing is with inner development, it does feel like I mean, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a global movement, but at least it's a European movement
Mm,
where it seems like it's just like gradually building up momentum. So you might find that actually the culture comes from outside, that it sort of becomes the next big trend and suddenly everyone cares about it. And it's like, yeah, it's what we've been doing the last 5 years, like, and then you can, um, welcome people that have had their curiosity piqued by something that they saw outside. They're like, oh, it's in development. What's that about? And you're like, hey, it's here. Come on in.
hmm Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's I think exactly the what's happening. That I
Yeah,
feel like there is cultural forces coming from outside that are, I think, helpful. Um, and I feel like these initiatives and ideas get traction. Also, a lot of resistance still within a faculty,
yeah,
obviously. Um, and I think the fact that there is traction that also relates to this initiative about the meta crisis that I'm currently like working on and thinking about is that I see the current format is kind of which I think is good and important. This inner development, presenting it as something very hopeful and positive, and hey, we're going to do this, and like these very good vibes. And I feel like there is also a value in facilitating spaces who take that vibe, but really use it also to invite more darker realities in,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
So it becomes grounded in a way. I think that can help for the critics also to take it more seriously,
yeah,
and it also is a way to like uh yeah design like to prevent or like spiritual bypassing in some form.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm equally concerned about spiritual bypassing as I am about um people doing psychological harm to themselves by engaging with questions around existential risk. Because I think that's endemic in a climate movement. Um, Now the circles that I'm moving in, it's more obviously happening with like AI safety researchers, where something comes on your radar and it says, "Oh, this is actually a mega concern. This is not just a little thing. This is actually like potentially we're talking about the end of humanity or the end of civilization or something like really big existential
mm,
threat." And for some reason it matches my interest or my psychology and grabs my awareness and then sucks me into this like enclosing, constricting, like overwhelming. I become a sort of zealot fanatic. Like all of my hours must be dedicated to this thing. This is the only thing that matters in the world. Um, and if I don't do it, then we're all doomed. There's this kind of like psychology that
yeah,
I've seen a lot of people get into. Um, and honestly, I would rather have people disengaged than to go down that path. I feel like that path is really a significant risk. And so, um, yeah, I only really trust people to confront existential risk when they have like really deep solidarity, where they have like people that can like remind them to smell the roses and be like, yeah, the existential risk, it's real. It has actually always been real through the entire experience of being a living creature, and it's becoming more intense in these specific domains at the moment. And like
mm,
we can have a balanced and like sober view into this. Um, but I don't trust an individual to maintain that sober view. It's like you need to have other
yeah,
people on your team kind of like it's like, yeah, okay, you've gone through like the intense darkness of it, and then now it's time to sober up and be like, okay, it's not the only thing that's happening in the world.
yeah, yeah. That's true. No, I think that's a good point. This is also what I'm grappling with at the moment of how to balance those kind of energies of
Yeah,
darkness and lightness.
yeah,
Um, because I do find it important that it also doesn't become a taboo, right? To speak about difficult issues. Because I
Yeah.
think that is also something that's currently happening very often, that it's a taboo to speak
Yeah.
about existential risk things. Basically, because it's just it's very hard to do it as a teacher because you have the responsibility to hold a classroom. And most teachers aren't very experienced in holding heavy, intense emotions.
Yeah.
So they just don't do it.
Yeah.
So you basically get a system that structurally kind of denies those things, which disconnects also from reality in some way. And I would argue that also that disconnection from reality in some way is also what alienates students and gives
Yeah.
also anxiety if they
Yeah.
kind of are aware that things are happening that are really not okay, but their whole social environment in their education doesn't really acknowledge it. So I feel like that there needs to be spaces that acknowledge it. And I agree that it shouldn't like push people into psychological rabbit holes and fear. But yeah, so it's about sort of how to acknowledge it
Mm.
and what is required of a container to do that in
Yeah.
the right way.
Yeah. Do you follow the Doom Optimism podcast?
No.
I really love it. I love it because for one thing, the two founders of the podcast immediately like decentralized and had a lot of different people write their own version of the Doom Optimist manifesto, and they've got loads of different hosts of the podcast. So that already, I'm very fond of them. But then the whole kind of theme that I hear throughout all of their conversations, it's like doom and optimism. So they'll interview someone about like the corruption in the food system, and the first half of the conversation is all doom, and then they're like, okay, enough, optimism, what's being done about it? Who are you excited about? What can I do right now? Like there's always the return to agency, the return to like possibility, the return to hope, the return to like grounded hope, like hope that's in context.
Mm.
Um and yeah, I find that very inspiring. It's like I'm happy to listen to that in a way where I've now quit listening to people that are only on the collapse narrative. It's the end of times thing. It's like I can't. There's literally no reason for me to listen to that kind of stuff because it doesn't leave me better equipped to handle the world. I need both. I need both, and
Mm-hmm.
so it can be done. I think it can be done, and yeah, I totally hear you that there's this like structural blind spot um, that everyone's like trying to walk around whistling past the graveyard, like do everything's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
everyone knows that everyone knows, but it's like this still kind of
Yeah.
silence
Of
thing
course.
happening.
And there's a very strong like whole social system of social norms related
Yeah,
to our economy and business as usual
yeah,
culture that keeps that intact, but
yeah.
basically actively also gets in the way of people reckoning with the time that we're in.
I mean, I have
Yeah.
to I have to be honest as well. Like the moment where my agency really came online in any kind of substantive, like 0 to 1 kind of way, was the Occupy movement. And my first encounter with Occupy, like face-to-face encounter, when I actually went down to the campsite, was well, we didn't even have a camp yet. It was the sort of the first it was the International Day of Solidarity with Occupy Wall Street, and there was a protest called in Wellington, where I'm from, and I went down to this demonstration, and there was a bunch of random people milling around with no idea what they were supposed to do, um, because the thing we knew about Occupy was like it's leaderless, no one's in charge, and so everyone's like, oh, well, how do we start then? And then someone said, hey, look, I don't want to be the boss or anything, but I thought maybe it's useful if I tell you why I came down today to the square. And I'll talk for 5 minutes and then someone else can have a turn. And he talked about basically his fear of existential risk, like specific issues that he was concerned about. And then the next person shared, and the next person shared, and the next person shared. And it turned into this like organic sharing circle of citizens who didn't know each other, naming their profound fears and grief about all sorts of different dimensions of society that they were upset about. And that was like such a transformation for me. Like it
Mm.
reformatted my identity in the space of like an hour, like, oh, I'm a citizen. These people are citizens. We're a thing. Like we actually, this is what a country is made of. Um, and from that sharing of like what, of like disclosing what had been hidden, it's like we had formed a bond immediately of like, this is stuff that I don't have anyone to talk to about my fear about what we're doing to our habitat or what we're doing for this issue or for that issue. Finding suddenly all of these people that are taking me seriously and willing to listen was like, wow, that's an enormous bond of care that we have with each other. And then, yeah,
Mm.
then later on, we took the decision to start an encampment, and then the camp was like completely self-organized. So it was like, you know, um, agency on steroids. But yeah, I do want to acknowledge that the talking about the scary stuff was incredibly bonding and like a really
Mm.
excellent part of the journey. It's just that I'm now at a point where I'm like, okay, I've kind of gone through my process now, and I need to stay focused on like the small practical stuff that I can do, and the big doomy stuff kind of distracts me from that. I don't need that. But um that's
Yeah.
on the other side, you know. It's
Yeah,
not
exactly.
from a
Yeah.
position of ignorance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And I think that maybe it's about an awareness of these stages of awareness that people tend to go through,
Yeah,
and that is maybe an important developmental pathway.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I think then the kind of leadership, as a teacher, the responsibility is if you're going to invite people to go in through this process, how do you make sure that the process is not a dead end, but there's actually some kind of, there's an exit, and the exit looks like action and care and create a sense of purpose and meaning in the world and like purpose and like, oh, right, I know my place. I've got a thing to do and it's important rather than this like
Hmm.
grinding, grinding, grinding,
Yes. Yeah.
overwhelming,
Exactly.
depressing, like,
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. To me, I imagine that it's about like leaving, also letting go of some old ideas and beliefs and attachment to make sense space for a renewed sense of meaning and purpose.
yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't expect that this message would get through at all, but where my process led me to is I'm much less scared about the future now that I have a much deeper appreciation for how emergence works, and that I think like the the things that we're frightened of, whether it's AI or climate or migration or anything, are emergent properties of groups. And the thing about emergent properties is that they're like unintelligible to the members. Like there's a kind of collective superintelligence that gets formed by a large group of people that is beyond the capacity of its members to understand.
Hmm.
And that it's shifted my I've sort of gone through an epistemic shift, I think, where I no longer feel like it is my job to have a clean and intelligible mental model about how we navigate the climate transition. Like that's not really what I need to do. I just need to pay attention to like how I'm operating at my level of scale in a way that's
Yeah.
good for me, good for my neighborhood, and that leaves a positive residue at every scale. If I'm doing that, that's enough. Um, and it was this like relentless focus on doing collective projects that gave me that embodied understanding of what it
Mm.
means to be a part of something and not have to be on the top of the thing. Because I think that's a big source of where the apocalyptic gloom comes from, is this individualistic sense that I need to get my whole head around the whole thing and
Yes.
come up with a logical plan that makes sense of like, oh, this is how we get from A to B, and I can understand it. And it's just like that's that's not going to happen. Like, how many climate meetings are we going to get through before we prove that it's not going to happen? Like, no one's going to get their head around it. It's not the
Yeah.
kind of problem we're looking at.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. That resonates. That's an important point. Yeah.
But this is part of this sort of secret payload of microsolidarity that I don't think you can expect to get through a five month course where, people have these random lots of other priorities going on. But
No, that's true. But I think still it's worthwhile. What I already tried to do is like pointers. If there is moments of emergence that happen, to kind of guide some attention to it.
yeah, yeah,
Like, hey,
yeah,
people become more familiar with recognizing when it happens
yeah.
and what it feels like, what it looks like.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
where the arts are great as well, right? Like, at summer camp we had a jam with 5 or 6 people or something, and it's like, who's leading the band? It's the emergent thing above the band that's leading the band. And
Hmm.
we're all intuiting a connection to it and it's guiding us and we're all playing stuff we've never played before and it sounds great and we're having a good time.
Hmm.
Where is that coming from, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I
Exactly.
just think it's that same force, but at a larger scale. That is like that's where I get my hope about how we navigate the climate.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But there is guidance we can find if we can attend to it. Yeah.
Yeah. But if you ask those six people from the band to write down their definition of where they were being guided or what the meaning was or what language, what are the priorities of the value, like it doesn't, it's unintelligible. It's
Hmm.
ineffable.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
And yet it's
Yeah.
coherent. Somehow we get pulled, we're playing the same song, like we
Hmm.
are forming a coherent whole. And that is such a paradox when you try and apply just your straight rational reductionist thinking to it. Like it just breaks down. And
Mm.
yet
Yeah.
the music's beautiful and people are enjoying the dance. So
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Really cool. Hmm. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate the conversation. You taking the
me
time.
too.
Yeah.
Me too. It's really fun. I wonder if you have any appetite for other, assuming there's a small group of people listen to this conversation after us. Um, I wonder if you have any appetite for meeting other people that are in a similar role to you or that are interested in like how to apply microsolidarity at universities. Like, do you have capacity for that?
Yeah. I would be definitely interested. You mean like, for example, a group call
Yeah,
to?
something like that. Just if I can basically send people your way when they say like, I'm at university, I'm wondering how to apply this.
Yeah. Yeah. Be open for that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Definitely.
nice. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
to anyone that is witnessing us from the future, yeah, you can leave a comment, you can contact me, and I'll make sure that you get in touch.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. That's really great.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. And I look forward to experimenting further the next semester. I'm starting in February again, so still some
Great.
time. But yeah.
Great. Well, I want to be really clear, like this is the part of the system that I'm most committed to is like being able to support practitioners in their different contexts. So, um, I'm really delighted to have conversations like this, and I'm really curious
Mhm.
to hear what you learn. And I want to jam with you on the next iteration. And yeah, please do it. Let's do it again.
Cool. Nice. I really appreciate that. Yeah. I'd love that too. Yeah. And also
Awesome.
like if there is like once like you or someone else from the Microsolidarity network would be interested once to like also give for example a talk or a session for the group of students, uh, I think that would be really cool. Like to also share a bit sort of your vision and your larger framework of why it is that you do what you do, because I think it's very interesting for them to also hear that. Yeah.
Definitely. Love to.
Okay. Great.
Nice.
That's,
All right. Let's wrap it up there.
yeah. Let's do it.